Hey brother, today I want to talk to you in a video about intimacy, specifically answering the question that I and the guys on Mentoring Men are asked all the time, which is how do I create intimacy in a long-term, multi-decade relationship like marriage? And the reason they're asking that is because one of the things we do in our journey with men is we help them to stop seeing intimacy as something that is a consumable resource that they go out and get from the woman in their life. But we talk about intimacy being something that is ours to create. And so naturally then a man wants to say, well, how do I create intimacy? Okay, there's a couple things that we need to talk about. And the first is that intimacy does not mean sex. Sex is just one way to celebrate intimacy, to experience an aspect of intimacy. And so I'm not talking about merely how to create sexual intimacy. I think for a man who understands what intimacy is and how to experience and create intimacy, sex is a natural byproduct of that in his life. And so this video is not about that. This video is to answer the question about how to cultivate or create intimacy in a long-term relationship. The first thing we need to do to understand that is to talk about, well, what does it mean to be intimate? What is intimacy? I think a really simple way of talking about intimacy is to say it like this. Intimacy is allowing yourself, the private part of yourself, to be seen. One way to say that might be to allow yourself to be naked, and that's both physically true, but also just at a soul or inside level. It's letting people see the real you, the authentic person that you are. And so if you start thinking about how do I create intimacy, the way to start thinking about creating intimacy is to think about being authentic. You have to be able to be the real you. And you have to be authentically yourself presently. Now, what does that mean to be present? What I mean by being present is being in this moment occupied with being yourself and being with a person who is in front of you. And this is really where intimacy starts to break down in the long-term relationships like marriage, because a man is distracted. Now, when a man is distracted, he is not present. You can't be distracted and present. And so if you're distracted, you will not be authentic and intimate. You'll be sitting there in front of a person. You might be hearing the words, but in your mind, you're somewhere else. And this is a big problem with what erodes intimacy in marriage and in long-term relationships, is that, at least for men, and we're talking to men because we mentor men, we're not a women's mentoring organization, so we're talking to men. And so in a man's life, he's up in his head. And when a man is up in his head, he's there for a reason. He's there because he's distracted. He's distracted by maybe something going on in his life, something with work, something with a project, an idea, etc., etc., etc. And so in the relationship and in the moment, he's not present because he's in the future. He's in a future where he's finishing a task. He's in the future where he's thinking about what he's going to say in response to what the woman in front of him is saying. He's everywhere but this moment. And so the man is distracted by the future. He's up in his head, or you might say the ego. And so to create intimacy, you have to learn to be present. I would suggest, and we would suggest in our community, that presence is actually your default state whenever you're not anxious, afraid, insecure, or ashamed. That when you're not those things, your brain will basically chill out, and you'll be an open-hearted, warm, connected, engaged, and present man. And so if you just understand how to be that within yourself, you are creating intimacy within yourself, which means when you have a sense of your own inner dialogue, this is without anyone else around, that you know how to be present with you. You know how to experience your inside life without getting sucked up into your head and thinking about things that feel anxious, afraid, insecure, and ashamed. When you're in those four areas, we call them the pillars of suffering. When you're experiencing those, you're getting pulled up into the head. You're getting pulled up in your brain into this anxious energy that's worrying about the future. All of those are always in some way future oriented. Even shame is generally looking at the past, concluding there's some unworthiness within us, and then fearing the future because of that. None of those things are actually about this moment. They're all leaving the present and imagining a different future where we feel differently about ourselves, where good things are happening or bad things are happening. But both of those are to not be present with yourself. And so what we help men really ultimately do in our community is address fear, shame, anxiety, and insecurity, because these are constantly robbing a man of opportunity to just be okay within himself, with himself, and then with other people. And so we find that men that we work with, oftentimes they don't know how to experience even an internal intimacy with self. They don't know how to accept themselves. They don't know how to live with self-confidence, with appreciation of themselves, with respect for themselves. They don't have a solid sense of value and worth and significance. They don't know how to feel these things within themselves because of that shame, that fear, that anxiety, and insecurity. And as a result, they get pulled up into their ego or to their head, and they spend an inordinate amount of time ruminating on thoughts and things. And it's things that's either regrets about the past or hopes that the future is different, but they just don't know how to be in this moment and just be there, just be okay or be present. That man is distracted, and that man can't create the kind of intimacy within himself that he can then extend to a partner on a date or on the couch or in the kitchen or with his wife. In order to provide intimacy for a woman, you have to know how to be intimate with you. You have to know what it's like to just be okay in your own privacy with who you are, without judging it, without critiquing it, without thinking poorly of yourself, just to be okay. Right? And so intimacy starts with acceptance, self-acceptance. The fundamental foundation, I believe, for intimacy is self-acceptance, which means to let go of judging yourself. Stop seeing yourself as unwhole, unworthy, inadequate. Now, that's a deeper work I can't get into in this video, but this is what we help men with. And when you have done that work and you feel whole and you feel adequate, your brain is not distracted by all these stories of, oh no, what if this happens? And so the mind stops ruminating and you learn to just be okay where you are. This probably sounds spiritual to some people. And I wouldn't say that it is. We're not a religious organization. We're not woo-woo. We explain to men how to accomplish these things through just deeply reflective personal work. And it leads a man to just feeling like, you know what, I'm okay with me right now. He learns once again how to feel present with himself. He learns how to feel intimate with himself. And when a man does that, the intimacy that he creates within becomes the intimacy that he can extend to a partner. He knows how to be himself without being distracted by his brain. And he knows how to be with a woman without being distracted by his brain. And so his level of distraction goes way down, and his level of presence goes way up. And that's how you begin to create intimacy in a relationship, because that same level of self-acceptance and the release of judgment within is a place that you start to live from. And so when you're with a partner and you're with them and you're present and you're not distracted, you're also accepting them as well. You're not judging them. You're just with the person in a non-judgmental, accepting way. You're giving them the same warmth that you give yourself, the same regard, the same respect, the same appreciation. You're basically willing to see their personal life with acceptance. And so it's like seeing somebody naked and saying, I'm good with that, right? And it starts within. You have to be able to see yourself naked and say, I'm good with that. I'm okay. And then see a partner and say, I'm good with that. You're okay. That is how you cultivate conceptually intimacy in a relationship. And when two people get very good at being together without feeling judged, and feeling accepted, and feeling warmth from each other, and appreciation, and kindness, and regard, the natural thing in a relationship then is to be physically intimate. It doesn't mean it always happens. This is not a game you're playing. I'm not telling you how to manipulate. I'm telling you how to be a truly, deeply, authentically intimate man. And when you do that well, you will never be short of physical intimacy. In fact, being short on physical intimacy, like in a sexless marriage, what we usually always find with these men is they don't know how to be intimate with themselves. They are people that generally are way up in their heads. They're people that ruminate a lot. They have conversations in the shower with imaginary people. They have arguments constantly. They play these games inside, these dialogues. They're constantly in their thoughts. And the reason they're that way is because, again, shame, fear, anxiety, and insecurity. And until they resolve that, and until they can return to a feeling of being okay within themselves, being intimate, being private, being naked and okay within, they don't know how to create it with other people. And that's what begins to erode the sexual intimacy and intimacy in general in a long-term relationship like marriage. Now, I have lots more to say on that topic. We help men all over the world to reconnect with themselves, to rebuild intimacy in relationships that are just really struggling, relationships that these men believe to be irreparably broken and harmed. And we help guys turn that around, and we help them turn it around by going through those things that we talked about. If I've piqued your curiosity about that, I want you to reach out. There's going to be a link below. You can fill out a form, have a session with me. It's not a sales pitch. It's going to be you and I talking about these kinds of things, but in your life. We'll talk about what's going on, what's not working, what do you want differently, what's standing in the way, and we'll have that kind of conversation. Like I said, no sales pitch. We have no sales funnel. This is all about us serving men with the things that we wish we had known earlier in life. If you want to participate in that, I invite you to scroll down, click that link, fill out that form, let's have a call, and we'll talk. With that, I wish you a good night, and I hope to talk to you soon in another video. Take care.